Happy Sunday. I like those shirts. Let's let's start on our backs. Something that feels nice and supportive and offers you the ability to just let go. And then find a breath that kind of works in tandem with your positioning. Something that allows you to continually move towards that sensation of ease. And so that ease just that ease and that trust of the support continue to grow within each cycle of breath. We'll give ourselves about 30 more seconds just to settle in here. And then when it feels appropriate for you, let's extend both arms towards the ceiling. So fingertips pointing straight up. And we're going to wrap the arms around our body like we're giving ourselves a hug. And just squeeze and maybe offer a little bit of a lateral rock here. If you can capture some tension on the scapula and get a little pull towards the edge of your body, you can feel some expansiveness there. If not, the rocking tends to be a pretty effective tool as well. And then just note which arm is on top, and we'll extend the arms up and reverse that hug direction so that the second arm comes on top. Give yourself that same squeeze and maybe a little rock here. And then we'll release the arms out towards cactus and let both knees fall over towards the right. Not a super long hold here, kind of using the fact that we're not quite warmed up to get some length out of the twist. And then we'll come back to neutral. And both knees will fall over to that second side, the left side. Again, just landing here and allowing for that twist to offer some level of expansiveness. And knees will come back to neutral. And push down to the toe mounds and heels. Lift the belt line maybe like an inch or so off the mat, just enough for a little hip reset. And then a little lateral sway through the hips. And eventually we'll release the tailbone back down to the mat and let the knees fall to one direction or the other, whatever side feels most appropriate. We're going to roll right over onto our bellies. And from the belly space, we're going to create that diamond with our hands, the thumbs and index fingers coming together. Place that in the middle of the mat and take your right ear and just place the right ear roughly in line with that diamond alignment. So we have a little cervical spine rotation here. And we'll just start to drift our way back into that breath that is supporting the trust and the release and the relaxation into the shape. Really thinking about finding our way into as much ease as is possible. Last 15 seconds on this first side. And as you're right, when you're ready, let's bring our head back to neutral. Just check and make sure you still have that nice middle alignment with that diamond between the thumbs and the index fingers. And we'll go to the second side. So left ear is coming down into that space you've created. And we're finding our way back into that ease of breath. Paying attention to how the pressure on the front of the body is impacting your capacity to fully inhale. And making sure you are not responding to that physical pressure by tensing up in any way. And when you're ready, head's going to come back to neutral. We're going to slide the elbows back so that they're underneath the shoulders and we can get into a Sphinx pose. Palms down, fingertips actively engaging into the mat. Try to feel the anterior expansiveness around the diaphragm. The more you push into the fingertips, the more that sensation is there. And then adjust the head so that the low back is receptive to where we are.
And then when you feel right here, let's lower our forehead back down to the mat. We'll slide our hands underneath the shoulders, and we're going to use the strength of the hands to transition horizontally back into child's pose. So we're trying to stay as low as we can to the mat. Nose can drag against that mat if that feels possible for you. And as we land here, child's pose has some inherent flexion to it. We've just come out of this big extension shape. We've really kind of jumbled up the beginning of clap. So try to get the anterior hip crease to allow for as much depth, tailbone pushing back towards the back of your room or mat as possible. And then get back into that sensation of ease that we started class with on our back. And think about allowing the upper half of the body to just melt over the lower half of the body, so that truly we're using the legs as a prop to have this articulation of the spine and this subtle flexion. Last 30 seconds here. And then the fingertips are going to find their way to the mat in front of you. Feel that engagement, and we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees, tabletop. From tabletop, exhale out, drop the belly, lift the tailbone, lift the chin. Going back into this extension, right out of this a little bit elongated version of flexion, can feel a little stiff. Think about spending some time in the bottom of this shape and even being willing to adjust and move until you get the full maximum depth here. And then when you feel right, when you feel ready, you can come back to that neutral point and then take the inhale and go all the way up into the cat version, the flexion version of our cat-cow. And again, think about creating that same experience of being willing to hang out. And with that willingness to hang out, see if you can find some room with maybe just subtle adjustments. And then when you feel balanced, let's come back to a neutral spine, and we'll extend our legs out in front of us. Legs come out in front of us. We're going to go back into some flexion through a forward fold. Now, the stickiness of the posterior chain may start to really become a point of emphasis or a point of awareness. Remember, you can bend the knees. And then find your way back into that softening breath, that breath that we found when we were on our back, when we were in our most trusted yogic pose, right? Nothing can go wrong when we're laying on our back on our mat. Last 30 seconds here. And we'll walk the spine back to vertical. Okay. Into flexion. We're going to go back into extension. To do this, I'm going to give you the choice. So a nice thing about us practicing together so frequently and for so long is I can really trust you to make this decision. So your choice, you can go with the hot dog fold, like relatively dense, relatively minimal lift, or you can go with the roll. This has some maybe more density, certainly some more lift to it. It's going to come across the back, so running the opposite direction of the spine and in the middle of the back, right where the rib cage and the lumbar meet at that thoracic joint. So depending on how your spine feels after going through this kind of continual path of flexion and extension, make the right choice here, and then just let your body settle back into a supported extension. And this really counteracts kind of the child's pose where we had the supported flexion. We used our legs as the prop there. We're using the blanket towel as the prop here. There's this young businessman who has just bought his first home, and it's a very short distance from his parents' home. And he's taken on this new role at this big conglomerate company, and it's high pressure, high stress role. His parents are kind of intertwining themselves into his life in a way that he maybe doesn't fully want. And that's adding some extra layers of stress and pressure, and he's starting to maybe doubt or regret a little bit buying this home so close to them. Last 30 seconds here. And when you're right, knees coming to a bent position so that you can lift your tailbone high enough to slide the blanket prop out from underneath you and release the tailbone to the mat. We're going to go right after that unionization between the lumbar and the thoracic spine by taking our right ankle across our left thigh. And then the bottom of the right foot is going to come down to the mat. So this is my favorite twist. I like it because of where it puts the emphasis, which is right in the middle of the back. The right arm here opening up towards cactus or half T. really helps to accentuate that twist. And then the positioning of your gaze can also help, right? So you could look to the left, you could look straight up, or you could look to the right, which will help add some rotation. If you're all the way anchored in the right hand and you're all the way gazing towards the right side of your room, you can take the left hand, place that on the lateral edge, that outside edge of your right thigh, and start to pressure that down slightly. And that will add even more of that twist engagement. It's a soft tissue expander instead of a structural increase. But if we start to add some soft tissue rotation or some soft tissue length, we can start to ease more deeply in. Again, that is purely optional. And so with the layers of stress that this young man is receiving, he starts to fall behind on the household duties. The dishes start piling up and the dirty clothes start piling up and the weeds start growing in the yard. And the house pretty quickly looks like it's overrun as passerbyers are walking by. The weeds are as tall as the fence. Last 30 seconds here. And when you're right, the left knee can come back up to neutral. The right knee can release and make its way so the right foot can come back to its rightful side of the mat. And let's take this right over to side two. So left ankle is going to cross over the right thigh. Bottom of the left foot comes down to the mat. The left arm can open up towards cactus or T. The gaze can be anywhere that feels like it's beneficial to accentuate the twist. We look over towards the left, and that right hand, if desired, can pressurize from the lateral edge kind of down to increase the musculature length, the need of elongation. And as the weeds start piling up and the inside of the home starts becoming more and more chaotic, the pressure starts to rise. Now it's not just work pressure, it's not just familial pressure, it's living space pressure. Last 30 seconds here on the second side.
And so this young man's parents come over one day. They hadn't been over in maybe a month or so. They kind of felt the tension, and they see the house, and it's just overgrown with weeds. And so that's the first thing they say when they see their son. When you're right, when you're ready, coming back to neutral, left foot comes down to the floor or mat, and we'll just add a little bit of movement here. Just trying to find our way back into some level of balance at the hip space. And then eventually bottoms of the feet are going to come together and the knees are going to fall out wide. Now we're just going to let this kind of settle into its full depth. So feel how deeply you can settle here. And then we'll help the knees back up to neutral. Grab our blanket or towel, and we'll want that to be towel length. So if you have a blanket, you're going shelf fold, one unfold, and then we'll roll that. And that's just going to come over the ankles. It's going to provide some support for this supine butterfly. Now you kind of know the full depth. So think about setting the prop so that it backs off the full depth, maybe like 5 to 10%. So you're not fully exposed, but you're comfortable here. And the support is allowing for some expansiveness for sure, but not all the way to that full openness. And then just let the arms settle where they feel most comfortable. And find that breath we started class with that you fully trust and can ease yourself into. And so he greets his mom out front, and they have a conversation, and he doesn't even invite them in. They are so like stuck on the weeds that after a very brief conversation, he sends them on their way, and he spends the rest of the day cleaning out the yard. And as it so happens, they gather up all of their tools and their kind of yard care equipment, and his parents are coming back, and they were planning on helping him. When they get there, they see that everything's done. They knock on the door, and he answers, and he kind of sheepishly opens the door, and they invite themselves in, and then they see that the house is like in complete chaos, and this has never been their experience with him before. So they ask, what's going on? He says, it's just been really stressed with work, and it's hard to keep up with all these things, and I have emails coming in and phone calls coming in at all hours, trying to be responsive in this new career I've started. And he's admitting that the stress is getting to him, that the pressure is getting to him, that he's not remarkably happy with the life experience he's created. And so his mom kind of looks around the house, and she sees just chaos everywhere. Finding the real escape within your exhales, so that each exhale is like this grounding and landing into the space. And so she's looking around the house, and she just turns to her son and she says, why are you trying to fix the outside
with what you can do from within. And he looks around and he apologizes and he's like, I know, it's chaos in here. I'm sorry. And he kind of sends his parents on their way. And we'll give ourselves about another 60 seconds here. Feel right when you feel right. Let's bring our knees back to neutral. We'll take our blanket or towel out or off of our ankles and go back to, we're going to work our way to like a block fold. So this does not need to be perfect. We're looking for a little density that we can place in between the thighs. And then once you have that density, we're going to grab our ball and place that, search for the spot where the soft tissue kind of meets, where glute med and hip meet at that hip flexor. And we're going to put the ball there and roll towards the ball. Now, the block blanket is here just to keep the hips relatively neutral. So as you roll, you don't have to go all the way onto your side. You can if the ball, if the hip flexor, if everything lines to make that possible, wonderful. I will say this is a pretty sensitive area of tissue. So don't feel like you need to have that left thigh planted. We're just looking to capture a little of that potentially dysfunctional tissue and put a little pressure against it and then find our way back to our breath. So kind of a big point. The other thing I should have called out is if you're really going towards this side and it's just not feeling stable, go with the blanket underneath the left thigh and just use your mental capacity, right? Your powers to keep the hips neutral. So totally up to you how you do that, but make sure that all of the hip alignment feels good. The ball pressure is certainly creating some awareness, but it's not so much that you can't fully find your way back into that ease of breath that we started practice with. And we're going to give ourselves 30 more seconds here.
And as you feel right, when you feel right, knees come back to neutral. We'll pull that ball out. We should feel some pretty good asymmetry across the hip space. We're going to take this ball over to our second side, and we have that same opportunity. So we're finding that soft tissue point, really kind of knowing it's a point of pretty good dysfunction for most of us. And then we're rolling only to the point where it feels like we're able to progress, right? If we go to the point where we feel like we're in excruciating pain, pretty unlikely we're going to progress from there. So we're using the prop either under the lateral edge or in the middle of the legs. We're keeping the hips even. We're supporting the sensation in a way where we can still breathe. Last 15 seconds here. And we'll bring the knees back to neutral. We'll take that ball out. We can set that to the, we can set the ball to the side. We can set the blanket to the side and just let your knees and hips kind of explore here. So this can be dynamic rotation. It could be kind of fluttering, whatever feels like it is releasing that sensation that we added to our hips. It's all for that. And we'll just find our way into that same ease. And then eventually knees are going to come back to neutral. And let's allow both knees to fall over towards the left. Now, as you rotate here, we've freed up some hip room, right? Atypical hip room. We're not usually this open in the hips. Make sure that if the stacking of the hips is the appropriate thing, you do that. And note that you still do have access to that blanket. If having the hips stacked and supported is the ideal situation, go back or find your way into a shape that is really supportive of the knees. If stacking isn't appropriate, note that you can splay out, right? You don't have to have the knees stacked. What we're looking to do is put our body in a twist where the hips feel like they are receiving the most benefit. So really be willing to explore, trust, and listen to what your body wants here. And we'll settle right in. And so this young man, his parents leave and he's kind of looking around. He's kind of recognizing that it was silly for him to do all this work to clean up the outside of the house when the inside of the house was so chaotic. And so over the course of the next week, he starts to dedicate time and energy and effort into rectifying the chaos he's created within his living space. One day he does the dishes and he gets everything cleaned up and put away. He gets his huge pile of laundry cleaned up and folded and put away. He wipes the countertops down and sweeps the floors and mops the floors, washes the windows. And just kind of day after day after day, he's organizing things and he's hadn't really spent any time beautifying his home. So he's buying, little pieces of art and placing them in the appropriate spots. And a week later, his parents come over and they walk through the yard and it's still well kept. And they walk into the house and they're surprised to see it's like it's been completely redone. Last 60 seconds here. And we'll bring our knees back to neutral. Settle back into that neutral space. Find the balance for your hips. Lift yourself into a little bridge. Again, thinking about that anterior neutrality here is the point of kind of reference for what's appropriate. And then tailbone comes back down, knees fall over to that second side. Same thing, a lot of room in the hips. So adjust and position yourself in a way that's beneficial for the hips. And settle into what will be our final twist. And so his parents come over and they're kind of getting shown around by him. And he's, pointing to statues and figurines he put in and pointing to art he's put on the wall. And as he's giving kind of the explanations, his mother notices that there's just no passion in his explanations. And everything looks perfect, right? It's like he has clearly gone from this chaotic state to this pristine presentation. but she keeps finding herself wondering, what feels off about her son. And as they go through the refurbished tour of this home, that thought keeps popping up. Something is off, and she can't quite nail down what it is. We're settling into that ease of breath here, really finding the ability to land at the end of the exhale. And we'll give ourselves our last 60 seconds in this second side. We'll bring our knees back to neutral. And we'll just move and sway, finding our way back to balance, and then finding that midline, lifting up into one final bridge. When you feel ready, tailbone comes back down to the mat. Maybe eyes closed, but awareness certainly drifts within you. Ask yourself if there's anything that you want, need, desire, could benefit from before Shavasana. And if there is, offer that to yourself. If you're ready to slip into a state of stillness, feel free to do that. And feel free to adjust, utilize props, make yourself comfortable. But eventually, we will find some stillness here. And we will just settle into some ease. And so they get done, and his parents are kind of wrapping up and getting ready to go. His mom pulls him over to the side, and she looks him right in the eye. She's a foot away from him, and she says, something seems off. Are you happy? And we're just finding our way fully into ease here. And so he hears this question and he looks back and he knows his mom well enough to know she's not going to believe him if he says he is. So he says, I'm kind of struggling, it's work is a lot, the house is a lot. The pressure is getting to me. And she says, why are you worried about the house? Why are you worried about the yard? Why are you worried? Why are you attempting to fix from without what you can fix from within? We'll start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes. To our wrists and our ankles. Elbows and knees. Shoulders and hips. Neck and head. Jaw, eyes, tongue. And eventually, we'll utilize this movement to transition from the shape we're in back into a seat. In the seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close. And with your next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you make sure that you are addressing those things related to you from within and see how that impacts your experience? Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Love the heck out of you. Appreciate the heck out of you. I'll be back tomorrow night. We'll do this thing. So I'd love to see you. If not, I'll see you again next Sunday. Have a beautiful week or beautiful day. Mwah.
Thank you.
Thank you.